How's it going, Yankee fans? Welcome back to Fireside Yankees with your boys, Alex and Ryan. So today we're talking about Clark Schmidt. A lot of people believe that he could be traded. A lot of people believe he could be a starting pitcher for this team for a very long time. 28 years old, about a year of experience here as a starter, and we saw some upside. I know you were a Clark Schmidt advocate early in the season. He put together some really exciting performances where we were like, okay, like this guy has that potential. But then we saw him bounce back with like a really bad one. We're like, okay, like where's the consistency? We're wondering where the consistency is. He really struggled to get past the fifth, sixth innings of games. He really started to break down. His location started to falter, and teams were starting to pick up where his pitches were going, predict what was going to happen. And obviously, he was on the opposite end of that production, and did hurt his ERA, it hurt his numbers quite significantly at times. But there is upside there. He's just a 28-year-old kid, basically, which is why we're so excited about Yoshinobu Yamamoto. By the way, if the Yankees do manage to get him, like we're talking about Clark Schmidt at 28 years old, and you look at Yamamoto at 25 and being like, holy crap, this guy is actually a freaking monster. So, what are your thoughts on Clark Schmidt as a future piece? Do you think it's worthwhile to consider trading him to a team that may need an MLB ready pitcher now? For example, the Padres, who could offload Juan Soto. It's going to take a lot more than Clark Schmidt, but he could be a key piece in a prospective deal. What are your thoughts about his future? And do you think the Yankees should bet on his upside and keep him around, or try to leverage him as trade bait for this upcoming next couple of months where we could land a superstar talent?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I do think that the Yankees are going to have at least conversations regarding Clark Schmidt and where he'll be next year. One of the biggest things that came out over the offseason in terms of like potential deals that were talked about in the deadline was that the Yankees and Red Sox were engaged in a conversation regarding Clark Schmidt for Alex Verdugo. Now, as you kind of hinted at in the beginning, right, like there was a lot of ups and a lot of downs with Schmidt. There were moments where you're like, all right, this guy is clearly like an MLB starting pitcher, and the New York Yankees are going to really like having him in the rotation for a really long time. And then there were moments where it's like, is this guy like, is he ever going to be more than a 4 or 5 starter, right? Like the moment I think of in which I was like, all right, yep, he's definitely a major league starter was it was right before that Atlanta start. His ERA on the season was 4.23, which was right around, it was a little bit better than the league average for starting pitchers at the time. And then you think to yourself, all right, you start getting a little bit ahead of yourself. You're sort of thinking that this is the start of a stretch of being, one of a success story for the Yankees rotationally, and then he gets just blown up in Atlanta. He gets the brakes beaten off of him, and that kind of changed things. He kind of struggled to end the year. The Yankees pushed him a little bit. They had him, they had him pitch deeper into games. There were specific circumstances. I remember against Detroit twice. Against Tampa Bay, a couple times against Boston, where the Yankees were trying to see if he could give them a little bit more in terms of length and kind of challenge him. This was his first season throwing this many innings ever. Like, I'm not talking about in his major league career or his minor league career or his professional career. I'm talking about ever. Like in any sort of log tracked information that you can find publicly, Clark Schmidt has never thrown 159 innings in a calendar year. So it was a big toll on him, right? And I do think that played a little bit of a role in the velocity decline to end the season. And I think that velocity decline with, when your velocity gets worse, your stuff gets worse. When your stuff gets worse, your ability to get swings and misses gets worse. And, even damage prevention, right? Like, think of it like this, Alex. Is it easier to hit a fastball at 95 down the middle, or is it easier to hit a sweeping slider with 14 inches of horizontal movement that's ducking down and away, right? If it's a hard pitch to make contact with, it's probably a hard pitch to barrel up as well. So, those two things kind of play with each other in terms of, effectiveness. So, personally, I do think that Clark Schmidt has upside. I think that there are going to be things he's going to work on over the offseason. He is still objectively a guy who has not pitched very much professionally. In his major league career last year, he threw 60 innings, right? In his major league career, he has under 230 innings, right? In his minor league career, he has 185 innings. So when you have under 500 innings as a professional, you're still a little green. And do I think that Schmidt can get better? Absolutely. But again, as you mentioned, what can they get back for him? Because if they can get something back for him, it's going to be hard to justify not trading him, right? Like if you can get an impact player, we've heard him thrown in Juan Soto talks. We've talked about maybe dealing him for a guy like Brendan Donovan. Obviously him on his own would not net those two players, but if he's the headliner for those two deals, this team needs offense, and there are prospects on the way. You think Drew Thorpe, Chase Hampton, some guys are a little bit closer. You have Clayton Beeter and Will Warren. There is a little bit of a surplus there. So, I guess the question I have for you, Alex, is, what type of player would it take for you to say, all right, yeah, we got to move Schmidt in this deal, or Schmidt's headlining this deal, and we're more than okay with it?
I mean, look, it really isn't going to take that much for me to consider him as a movable piece. I think that he absolutely should be a key piece in a deal for a Juan Soto or a Brendan Donovan or anyone that can offer us substantial upside as an offensive weapon. The truth is if we go out and get Yamamoto and we trade Clark Schmidt, I'm not going to think twice about it. And the reason is I have a lot of faith in Drew Thorpe to be a very good player for us. He's 23 years old, kicked ass in Double A with Somerset. The guy has a ridiculous changeup, mid 90s fastball. His deception is elite. His swing and misses, the chase rate, and everything about him that really represents what the Yankees want in a pitcher, it screams future starter in this organization. Clayton Beeter, I think, could be a fine bullpen arm next year, similar to how they utilize Johnny Brito, or they're going to utilize a guy like that, or a spot starter for a couple innings. I could see them utilizing, a guy like Chase Hampton in the future as well. And, Will Warren could also be a spot starter for next year. We'll see what happens. But at the same time, look, you can bring back Frankie Montas on a one-year deal, sign Yamamoto, and trade Clark Schmidt, and your rotation looks something like this: Garrett Cole, Carlos Rodon, Yamamoto, Nestor Cortez, and of course Frankie Montas. And then you have a couple other arms that can play as that fifth option: Randy Vasquez, Brito. You have so many options here, and they're youth. They're guys that are going to get better with experience. And then Drew Thorpe could make his debut at some point next season, if not 2025 for sure. So personally, losing Clark Schmidt right now, I only consider him a 4-5 in the rotation. I think I'm much happier to sell on him to a team that thinks he could be a 2-3. Right now, he is a 4-5. Another team may see him and think he could be our 2-3. Because look, the Yankees having Garrett Cole, Rodon, and Yamamoto, those three pitchers are elite for a team like, I don't know, the Cardinals or the Padres, who just lost a ton of pitchers. Clark Schmidt would be their 3 guy, you know what I mean? If not 2 in some of other rotations. So you're selling him at a higher cost than the value he is to you, right? Could he get better? Absolutely. But we've seen Yankee prospects go in the wrong direction. Right now, I'm willing to sell on the idea that another team probably values him a little bit more than we do. He's a middling starter right now, back end starter for us. And for another team could be a 2-3. And that's a really good value for us, man. You get good value for players like that. So, and I think Drew Thorpe could be a 2-3 for us, in the future. He could be a 2-3 for us, not somebody else. So I feel as though that would be a trade. Again, we don't know what Drew Thorpe is going to be. I just think he has that level of stuff. That changeup, guys, and we know Matt Blake loves that changeup that rides away from lefties and rides in towards righties. He's got nasty stuff, dude. And this as much as anyone, Ryan. Drew Thorpe's changeup may be one of the best in the organization. You know what I mean? That's how good it is. It's 65 grade stuff coming out of the draft, and it's been 2 years, and it's only gotten better. The deception on that pitch is absolutely freaking insane, and the swing and miss, the chase rate is absolutely out of this world. 13 strikeouts per 9 in Double A, which is arguably, most people would say, it's the most difficult level of baseball. A lot of people compare the JPPL to Double A baseball, or the KBO to Double A baseball, Triple A baseball, and he just absolutely wiped the slate clean at 23 years old in that level of performance. They had to shut him down due to an innings limit. He was pitching so much, he just they couldn't take him out of games. He was just going. I really, and I'll ask you this question back, actually. If you had a choice right now to trade Clark Schmidt or to trade Drew Thorpe, which one of them are you trading? So I think that's actually a decent question to ask.
I'd say Schmidt, right? I think you as you mentioned, you kind of bank on the upside a little bit here, and you assume that Drew Thorpe has a higher ceiling, and that you have, you're the New York Yankees, and you can just go out and spend for the bridge options or the 1 or 2 year deals to find a guy to fill that back end spot until Drew Thorpe is ready. But the big thing for me in terms of what is Clark Schmidt's value going to look like, or what does Clark Schmidt project? What does Clark Schmidt project that as going forward? Is his velocity, right? I think that plays a big role in this, right? Is he going to be 92, 93, or is he going to be 93, 94, or 94, 95, right? That's the same question I have for Drew Thorpe. What's his velocity going to look like? The difference is Thorpe has a little bit of more time and a lot fewer injuries under his belt that you'd feel a little more comfortable saying, all right, I think Drew Thorpe is going to add about a mile or two on his fastball over the next 2 years. Schmidt, you feel a little bit it's a little bit shaky. It's an unknown, right? He's a little bit older. Now, I did mention he doesn't have a lot of innings on his arm, which does work in his favor, but, what is the Yankees' patience level going to look like? How willing can they be to just push him deep into games, right? They were able to do it last year. in September when they were out of the postseason mix for most of that month, if not all of that month. So, it's not as if, that was a situation which the Yankees were managing the way they would if, they were in a playoff spot, right? You think Aaron Boone would be pushing Clark Schmidt into the sixth inning of a competitive game and not go to his bullpen if their season depended on it? No, right? And it does change. Like, I know people are going to view next year and, look at this team and say, this team isn't good. But they're going to try to compete next year, right? And I imagine that the moves in the offseason will reflect that. But, you can't sit back and try to wait on things to happen to try to win games. Garrett Cole is, past the age of 30. Him and Aaron Judge are on, as people would say, the wrong side of 30. You can't just sit around and wait on your hands anymore. But with that being said, I would say this, if you look at what you have in your rotation right now, it's Garrett Cole, Nestor Cortez, Michael King, Clark Schmidt, and I'm missing Carlos Rodon. That's what I'm missing. All right. But you have Cole Rodon locked up long term. You don't really have to think about that. But you look at King and Cortez. Both those guys are free agents following the 2025 season. Does moving one of them entice the Yankees a little bit more? If you guys remember when the Yankees acquired Frankie Montas, at the time, it gave them 3 starters in Severino, Montgomery, and Montas, who were all going to hit free agency in the same year. And I think that influenced them to try to trade Jordan Montgomery because they knew they were going to sign all 3. We don't know if they're going to sign any of them now, funnily enough, because Severino regressed and Montas got hurt. But, could they be in that similar spot where it's like, we've got to pick between Cortez and King? I don't know if that's a decision they'll have to make at the deadline. I don't know if that's a decision they'll ever make. I don't know if they'll, just decide to let one of them go in free agency or just extend both. Who knows? But Clark Schmidt is cheap, right? Like, he is going to be here for 4 more years, or at least he's under contract for 4 more years. So, does that entice the Yankees a little bit more to say, all right, let's hang on to Schmidt and maybe try to deal Cortez or King? Personally, I think Cortez and King are better pitchers, but I don't know if the gap is going to be massive enough between Cortez and Schmidt, given the fact that Schmidt just threw 159 innings. Cortez has never thrown 159 major league innings in his career. So that does matter a little bit, right? We are talking about a team that has been historically very injury prone. So, I don't know. Like, I think this is a tougher call, Alex, in terms of like Schmidt versus other major league guys. But to answer your original question, Schmidt versus Thorpe, I don't think that's close. I think you keep Thorpe, but it is a thought, right? Like, you do have to think about the contracts here.
You do have to think about the contracts and the control that you do have over Thorpe is certainly attractive, but we'll see how the Yankees operate. A lot of teams want MLB ready pitching. Drew Thorpe is not MLB ready just yet, but he's getting close. He obviously, if you can wait the extra year, he could be something special. But if you want something that has upside right now and a lot of control, Clark Schmidt is a very good option for you. So we'll see how they go about leveraging some of these talents, but I do think we're going to move at least one of these pitching prospects this offseason because the Yankees are generating them at an astronomical pace, and not all of them are going to have jobs here. So you have to leverage some of them now. And I do believe that Juan Soto or Brendan Donovan or someone of that nature does fit the bill quite well for what the Yankees need. They certainly have the assets to get it done. So guys, we'll love to hear your perspectives below. Do you think the Yankees should leverage Clark Schmidt or keep him in the rotation and bet on his upside? Definitely an interesting conversation to have. Always happy to have your thoughts down below. Make sure to like and subscribe as always, and we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Yankees episode.